I am going to bring you up to speed on Hurricane Milton, which has crashed across Florida, leaving death and destruction in its wake. We are running a campaign with Food for the Poor over at HughHewitt.com. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have donated because they're headquartered in Florida and get relief supplies to the victims, which extend from Bradenton all the way over to Daytona Beach. Milton is now out to sea, and I'll keep you posted as the sun comes up. I begin this morning with Haviv Rettig-Gur from Israel. Good morning, Haviv. Welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining me. I want to read you some headlines from this morning's set of newspapers. Wall Street Journal, violent megalomaniac Sinwar takes Hamas on an even more radical path. Financial Times, how long will Israel's war in Lebanon last? Washington Post, Netanyahu-Gallant rivalry complicates Israeli response to Iran attack. And then from your own Times of Israel, Biden and Netanyahu hold direct and productive call, and U.S. seeking to install new Lebanese president, push aside weakened Hezbollah. It's almost impossible for an American civilian to make sense of what is going on, Haviv. I know you have 4 divisions of the IDF in southern Lebanon. Would you explain to the American audience what is phase 2? I bet I gather we are in the war now. The war's gone from Gaza to Lebanon and may go to Iran.
Yeah, it's not that complicated. Sometimes I think journalists just need to fill in other days' pages. For 12 months, Hezbollah has been bombarding Israeli cities. Probably over a dozen towns have been demolished. Tens of thousands, somewhere in the order of 70, possibly as much as 100. It's hard to actually count. 1,000 Israelis have been displaced for those 12 months. Israel has begged Hezbollah through American interlocutors to stop. France has begged. America itself has begged. Christian leaders in Lebanon have begged again and again and again. And of course, in Hezbollah's culture, political culture, when people ask them to stop, that means that they are the triumphant force. And so, of course, that led them to double down and continue. And 12 months have passed, and Lebanon wouldn't. The deep cowardice of every part of Lebanon that isn't Hezbollah prevented them from being able to stop bombarding Israel. And so now Israel's going to have to stop Hezbollah from bombarding Israel. And Israel has taken the offensive, and it's taken the offensive in a way that will guarantee the only way we can have a safe north of the country is if we do it. And it's a tragedy for Lebanon that that's the only alternative we have, but Lebanon made it so. And so that's it. That's where things stand. It's not more complicated than that. Qasim Naim, the number 2 in Hezbollah, who's probably number 1. I don't know. They're having a very hard time picking a number 1 because we keep just killing the number 1s the second they pick them. Said 2 days ago, and this led to a huge storm on Lebanese social media with Hezbollah supporters who were horrified that he said it, but he said that Hezbollah is ready for a ceasefire. Well, of course it's ready for a ceasefire. It's losing, and it still has quite a bit of its arsenal intact. Israel has a great deal more to destroy. So it's exactly the moment when Israel is going to clean up, and it's going to take a long time, but still that's the direction. And so Hezbollah is trying to survive. Israel can't let it, because there's no one in Lebanon, no one in the international community, not America, not France, not the UN. Hezbollah is in permanent violation of resolutions 1559 and 1701 of the Security Council. Those are binding, mandatory resolutions to disarm and move north of the Litani. Nothing in this world, actually will protect you. There is no international community when you actually need it. And so Israel has to get the job done. That's the tragedy, and that's what's happening.
Now, Haviv, on Monday, I spoke with former President Trump, and I asked him to come on the anniversary of the massacre and hostage-taking of 10/7 so that we could reflect on a year later. Here's the first thing we talked about, cut number 1. President, when we spoke in April, you said to me that Israel needed to win and win quickly. They are winning, but they're still fighting, and they're now fighting in Lebanon. Do you think Biden and Harris have been holding back Israel from winning?
I do. I think everything they do is the opposite. In particular, him. Now, she's a dumber person than him, but he has the worst foreign policy of anybody in history, probably. You know what you do with him? I realized it the other day. He could be one of the greatest foreign policy presidents. All you do is listen to what he says and do the opposite. If you've done the opposite for 30 years with this poor guy, this poor, pathetic guy, if you've done the opposite for 30 years, you would have been successful. But he's never gotten it right. And, I don't have to go back into the old secretaries of states and all the people that...
Secretary Gates said that. Secretary Gates. Now, so let me ask you, Haviv, have Israelis come to the place where Donald Trump was articulating? But you're always very gracious towards America and thank us for military and financial assistance. But has the Israeli leadership come to the place that Biden and Harris are just so much noise in their ear?
The Biden administration is angry that Israel isn't sharing its targets in Iran, its plans for a retaliation for the Iranian missile strike last week. And the Israelis are perfectly comfortable with it because they don't want to share the targets. And the reason they don't want to share the targets is that they are absolutely distrustful of the Americans, that they won't leak the targets. They won't try to prevent the targets. When we launched a massive escalation against Hezbollah after those 12 months of bombardment, the Americans leaked it and they publicized it to the New York Times. And that is not how, it's not just a question of allies or morals or loyalty. You can't fight a war that way. And so if sharing plans with the Americans means those plans are basically canceled, we can't share plans. And that is a problem the Biden administration created, not the Israelis. You got to come to the, if you want to be at the table, you do have to give us options. 12 months of bombardment in the north and tens of thousands of Israelis who can't go home for a year is not a status quo you can ask us to tolerate. And so, and the idea that that would be is a little bit it's not a question of, again, morals, it's a question of competence. If that really is your ask of the Israelis, then you're doing this wrong. So we do
Very,
have to
very wrong.
clean up in Lebanon. Yeah.
I want to play for you the second clip of President Trump on the war that Israel finds itself in, cut number 2. If Israel hits their nuclear sites, will you apply?
I dealt with Kim Jong-un, and he has nuclear weapons. And you tend to speak a little bit differently when they have nuclear weapons. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it does. Well, Nixon met with Mao, who's the greatest murderer of the 20th century, because they had nukes. He met with Brezhnev. I noticed you didn't meet with Khamenei, and he did not have nukes. Can they be allowed to have nukes?
No, they can't have nukes. No, they can't have nukes. Nukes, if you would see the power of these weapons that I renovated.
And then he went on to talk a bit about the danger of nuclear weapons. Haviv Redigur, what do you want your government to do vis-a-vis targeting Iran?
I'll tell you a dark secret, Hugh, that I have been saying for a year, and wiser Israelis than I have been saying for a year. Our enemies are a lot weaker than they look. Tyrants are liars. All the time, always, everything coming out of their mouths is to project auras of power because they don't have it. Democracies, when they go to war, with everyone agreeing on the war, everyone's rowing in the same direction, they can deploy immense resources. Dictators can't. Iran is a hollow shell. If we let them get a nuke, they will be a hollow shell bent on imperialist domination of the Middle East, covered by their own nukes. That can't happen. If you love Israel, please don't let Israel be in the shadow of the Iranian nuke. If you hate Israel, then for the sake of 600,000 dead Syrians in Assad's genocide that could not have happened without Iranian support, and for the sake of the Yemenis who had 250,000 people starved to death because of a civil war, pushed and funded and armed by Iran. And for the sake of a Lebanon, America is still today trying to negotiate with Lebanese political forces, Lebanese economic officials, the Lebanese central bank to stabilize the currency and the economy. Nothing you are doing to Lebanon will work as long as Hezbollah can keep gutting Lebanon. All of that is Iran. So just for the region, for the death toll that Iran has helped bring to this region, for the destruction, we cannot let them fall under their own have built out a nuclear umbrella. We also aren't sure they're not going to use it. They built in every place where they have gone, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, in Iraq. They built non-state actors claiming the powers of states to fight wars. It's a whole new model. We are now at war with Hezbollah, and Lebanon doesn't have a say. That whole idea that someone can have a fighting force, a military that can fight wars around the country, but not be responsible governor of that country, is an Iranian innovation that is destroying the state system and stability in the Middle East. For all those reasons, you have to take out their nukes. And I'll tell you a secret again. We started escalating and escalating and escalating. We are right now doing things way beyond anything the Americans thought was possible, anything the Americans thought would not bring, massive ravaging war to the region. and the enemies have fallen back in terror and fear.
Haviv, when you brought up Iran, you said if we hit the nuclear sites, please don't misunderstand it. Is that what Haviv Rettig-Gur wants your government to do? Take the best shot they can at the half dozen to a dozen sites in which the Iranian nuclear program is housed?
There isn't a simple answer. First of all, obviously, I'm a journalist, so I speak without any responsibility for actually getting the job done and the fallout and just the technical capacity to actually accomplish what needs to be accomplished in such a strike. So, people actually on the job have much more serious problems than I have just in sort of gaming it out in my head. But here's how I game it out in my head. It's not that complicated. Um, when Iran watched Hezbollah be shattered, the Hezbollah leadership be pushed back, the Israelis deeply, deeply penetrate Hezbollah to the point where you can't really have an alliance with Hezbollah because the Israelis apparently are everywhere in the organization. They can't do anything in a closed secret room without the Israelis knowing about it within the hour, and that's after killing the top 24 officials in the organization. When they watch the Israelis do that, the Iranians began to have a whole nother conversation, and we've already heard them speak about it. The deputy prime minister of Iran spoke about it, or the I forget exactly which one it was, but it might have been the vice president, spoke about it out loud, that they are not going to have to really sprint to the bomb. They're seriously considering pushing to have a bomb because once the Israelis stopped pretending to be weak and the Iranians were shown to be pretending to be strong, Iran is in terrible danger. The illusion is gone, and there's not much else Iran has to defend it, so it needs that bomb. And now the clock is ticking. Now, we showed in Yemen, we took out the Hodeidah port in Yemen, which is the Houthi government's main way of bringing in foreign currency. They ship out tens of thousands of barrels a day from that port. They no longer can. We destroyed it twice, and they're not even rebuilding at this point. They moved to a smaller port in a place called Ras Isa, and they were shipping out some of their natural gas from that smaller port. And it's ridiculous. I mean, the gumption is kind of impressive. It's just a pipe coming from two containers that they literally put out to sea to ships waiting in the sea. It's a pipe the size of a car, and you just drag it out to sea. That was the port. We bombed that. The only thing we left intact is a place called Safit, which is a port that has grain silos for importing humanitarian aid and grain and food. Everything else the Houthis have now is shattered. They don't have the infrastructure to bring in foreign currency. And that's what happens when you bombard us for 10 months. And we can do that. My just point in saying that is everything fragile about the infrastructure of the Houthi regime is exactly as fragile in Iran. Iran does not have, it has a layered S-300 missile defense system, but all of that. We have shown after the April 13 missile strike on Israel, we responded with just a couple of missiles, 3 or 4 missiles, that we put 300 yards from the Isfahan nuclear site, right past all of their missile shields. They couldn't get 300 missiles past our missile shield back in April. They did much better this time. They did not do so well last time. And we showed that we can get 3 missiles right where they need to go. So I would say this. We have to cause enough pain, enough cost to the IRGC, which owns most of the energy infrastructure in Iran, to make it not worthwhile to advance to the bomb. Or we have to make the actual infrastructure for building the bomb something that cannot survive. Those are 2 different kinds of attacks. They're each very dramatic. They each are spark a war. But the alternative is to have an Iran that still wants to destroy us with the proxies that it will then start to rebuild under the cover of a nuke.
Journalist Haviv Rettig-Gur, an analyst with the Times of Israel, joins me. He's been invaluable over the last year and a week in understanding the massacre, the kidnapping, the aftermath, everything that's happened in Gaza, now in Lebanon. We're talking about Iran. I want to go to the front closest to us, Haviv, and talk about anti-Semitism on the rise in the United States. Here is the 3rd cut I did with President Trump on Monday about anti-Semitism in America. Can we play that for Haviv, Adam? Now, let me turn to anti-Semitism in the United States. Your daughter's Jewish. Some of your grandchildren are Jewish. Your son-in-law is Jewish. Jewish students are not safe on many American campuses. Your alma mater, my alma mater. Biden and Harris have ignored this. I mean, they really have ignored it. If you're president, will you send the DOJ to those campuses, the Office of Civil Rights from the Department of Education, to enforce the law?
100%. I mean, the law's being broken. 100%. You wouldn't think you even have this. Did you ever think 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that you'd ever have this discussion?
No,
It's
I didn't.
unbelievable what's happening. And when you see these riots, and you see a lot of people too, but a lot of the people in that, a lot of those people are Jewish people. You know that they're Jewish kids.
Oh yeah, there
Very
are
foolish.
some outliers, but
They're
mostly
very.
Jewish students
They're
are afraid to be
Yeah, but
overt
then you
on
have
places
you
like
have other
Harvard and
Jewish
Penn.
students that are afraid. Yeah, that's true, and they should be afraid. I've never thought I would see this in my life with the campus riots and what they're saying and what they're doing, and they have to put them down quickly. They really have to put them down quickly.
They need now, Haviv Redigor, you've told me often that Israelis don't talk much about Americans. They talk to each other in Hebrew, and if America comes up, it's a quick sidelong glance at what's going on there. What do you think of the explosion of anti-Semitism in America? And we had more Jewish Americans beaten this week because they were carrying an Israeli flag.
Yeah, let me just clarify. Israelis are absolutely in love with America and obsessed with American pop culture and movies and know something about American democracy. They're not very they don't follow all that closely American politics. That's all.
Right.
But I do think that anti-Semitism. Uh, Let me put it this way: anti-Semitism is not being annoyed at Jews, disliking Jews. It's not stereotypes like Jews are greedy. People might have a stereotype: the Irish are drunk. These are kind of banal things. They're not okay. You shouldn't have them. You shouldn't think them. Judge people by their own individual accomplishments and personalities. But that's not what anti-Semitism is. Anti-Semitism is an ancient idea that was invented once and has recurred ever since. But it's the same basic archetype of an idea that the Jews, and it begins in early Christianity, early Islam, because they have to explain why they're a religion that borrows from Judaism, but Judaism's still around and the Jews don't accept the new religion, whatever. But it is the idea that the Jews stand in the way of the redemption of the world. What we see in these protests, in these screaming people, in these ideologues who feel profoundly self-righteous, the anti-Semite always feels self-righteous because they hate the Jews for the redemption of the world. Hamas was willing to destroy Gaza in order to burn down Israel so that Islam can be restored to power and the world can be redeemed. On campus, it is a secularized version of the exact same story. When you talk to them, and I've gone to campuses in the US and I've come up to protesters and I have used my Wisconsin accent to not be identified immediately as an Israeli. And I have said to them, what is it you believe? What do you think? What should we make of it? And they tell me things like everything is Palestine. All issues, police violence, Palestine, capitalist, raping of the working class is Palestine. Every idea, every concern, every ideological peccadillo all converges on Palestine. By the way, they don't know or care that the Assad regime mass murdered Palestinians in the Syrian civil war. That is not what they mean by Palestine. What they mean by Palestine is Israel. And so Israel is, because of these ideas of intersectionalism, Zionism is the thing standing in the way of the redemption of the world. If only Zionism would go away, all wars would end. I have heard that 100 times over the last 12 months. And so, yeah, these people are classic, old school, secularized, progressivized, modernized version of exactly the reason that Muslim regimes would oppress Jews, that certain Christian kingdoms would expel Jews, that some of the Crusaders would massacre Jews. It's the old idea that the Jews stand in the way of the redemption of the world, and it is on campus and it is spreading.
Aviv, I've said from the beginning, I don't know what your cabinet knows, and I don't have a stake in politics, but that whatever Israel does, we ought to back 100% and do so publicly. Whatever we're saying in the background, allies will disagree. What would you like to see? What would actually be something that Haviv Redigor would welcome from either Trump or Harris or even Biden, who's a lame duck and sometimes not very sharp or coherent? What would be of comfort to you?
America can do profound things to rein in Iran without a war, without a shot being fired, without a single pair of boots on the ground anywhere. A double-digit percentage of Iraqi oil exports now are laundered Iranian oil skirting American sanctions. America is some really clever lawyers and analysts and economists who can find all of that and know what to do about it, but it doesn't want to. You can bring the IRGC to heel. Iran's energy industry doesn't basically ship you oil, it ships China oil, your major geopolitical adversary. Putin asked Khamenei not to attack Israelis in ways that will kill civilians because he doesn't want the Israeli response to destroy Iranian drone factories that are supplying his war in Ukraine. Iran is a part of an axis that includes China and Russia and is destroying nations and are enemies of America in fundamental strategic ways, independent of anything having to do with Israel. At the very least, hunt down and enforce your own sanctions that Iraq is helping them skirt at a strategic level, at a massive level. If you destroy the ability of Iran to skirt oil sanctions, you crush the economic underpinnings of the Revolutionary Guard Corps, Iran's exporting imperialist power. That's one thing. There are 100 others: diplomatic, military, but not armed forces on the ground, clever military. The fact, I'll put it real simple: Israel did more to the Houthis, exacted real costs that made the Houthis begin to think again in 2 strikes than America, Britain, and France put together in an international coalition in the Bab el Mandeb Straits were ever willing to do. You can. You are the most dangerous and powerful force in the world. And you are the heart and soul and the beating heart of the free world. So exact massive costs from the Houthis. Why would you exact tiny little costs they don't feel? America can do everything more than it's doing. It just needs to believe in itself and believe that the world needs it. And then it'll reign in Iran. It'll help Israel tremendously, but my God, it'll help Lebanon. It'll help the Palestinians. Imagine Hamas without massive Iranian support. It would end Gaza faster. And so all of these things, America deciding to do everything very, very delicately, is the reason a lot of wars continue and are worse than they could be.
A very last question, Habib. Do you have any time frame in your mind for when we will know what the Netanyahu government has decided to do and has done against the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and the theocrats who run Iran?
Well, I mean, I think that we know that the Israelis are planning a surprise, and we know that the Israelis know that the bar is set very high based on recent successes.
Yes.
And that was a Mossad victory, and now the army wants to show that it can do it as well. There's a little bit of internal competition there. So I would say that the Bandar Abbas port in Iran was cleared out of all Iranian naval ships in anticipation of an Israeli attack. There have been a lot of empty buildings suddenly in Iraq. A lot of the headquarters of the pro-Iran militias in Iraq were emptied out. It's possible that Israel's waiting for everything to go back to normal to strike then when it's effective, when it'll actually hit some Iranian or Iranian proxy capabilities. It's also possible that they just want it to be something very, very surprising and to come from a direction that Iran doesn't expect. So I have no idea, but I can tell you that there's a frenetic amount of activity going on behind the scenes in Israel around this question. And so, I don't have the security. If I knew, I couldn't tell you. Luckily, I don't have the security clearance to know, so I can tell you everything I'm guessing. But we do know Iran expected it. We do know Iran has lowered that it's already gone down from that preparation level, and that's probably what the Israelis are waiting for.
Haviv Reddy Gore, I appreciate your joining me this morning. I look forward to talking to you again. Have an easy fast if you are an observant Jew on Yom Kippur, which I believe you are, and I look forward to talking to you after Yom Kippur. Thank you, Haviv.
Thanks, Hugh. Thanks.
Head over to my website. You'll find Hurricane Relief banner. Tom Trout got together with Food for the Poor, and I support Food for the Poor, and we, the Fetching Mr. Hewitt and I, gave $1,000 to this effort. The path of Hurricane Milton is extraordinary. It was fast. That's good. It had 19 known tornadoes touch down. That's bad. The flooding in Fort Myer that I saw before the lights went out was bad, and I know the winds, it ended up being a Category 3 across the entire Florida peninsula. It's out to sea now, though the back end of the storm is continuing to create havoc along the coastline of eastern Florida. A lot of people have lost a lot of things. And so Food for the Poor stepped up and told us, hey, that's our headquarters. We will put disaster relief on the ground with the trucks. We'll throw open the warehouses. We'll move it out. Will your folks help? $100 at the relief, a hurricane relief button at hughhewitt.com. $100. We'll do one kit for one family that will last them a couple of weeks. A lot of people, I know it hit a trailer park and that it's effectively gone and destroyed, but I'm encouraging all of you, disaster kits can serve up to 250 families each. There's a generators warehouse at Food for the Poor, and generators are going out. So $100 emergency bucket of cleaning supplies, $500, 5 families get the disaster kit with the tarp and the blankets, hygiene products, oral hydration, kids' activities. $500, 30 pallets of emergency relief supplies, the trucking container worth. The turnaround for emergency relief is 4 to 5 days from event to the last mile where it is needed. They are now working as well with partners up in North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, and Virginia. But the headquarters of Food for the Poor is in Florida. And therefore, if you're going to donate to anyone, that's why I said, let's put it up. Let's sponsor a campaign at hughhewitt.com. We've made our contribution there. I hope you will follow me over to hughhewitt.com and do the same thing. Now, I want to speak for a moment about the polling that you see, because I saw Guy Benson on yesterday with Stuart Varney, and Guy was very good at explaining this, which is we do not know if the errors pollsters made in 2016 and 2020 about Donald Trump have been corrected, not corrected, or overcorrected. Okay, we don't know. We are not going to know. There's no way of knowing that the polls are right or wrong or on target until after every ballot is cast. All I know is what I see, and I see a desperate vice president, a vice president calling into the Weather Channel, a vice president doing hand over mouth mumbling to her staff as she's on a Zoom call with Joe Biden and FEMA officials and local officials in Florida, explaining to her staff that, in fact, it's a live phone call and that she can't talk to them at that point. It is sort of a clown show, a clown car. The Kamala Harris campaign has driven James Carville close to crazy. I'm not sure we have that cut, Adam. You'll have to tell me if we have the James Carville cut or hardly, because I haven't been able to get all. Okay, here's James Carville yesterday.
The only thing I feel is the election's coming November 5th. And I'm scared to death, and I'll get a time to, obviously.
You're not in a reflective mood.
Not in a particular reflective mood right now. I'm very, very concerned and very
What does
scared.
Harris need to do with the month left?
All right, 7 months left. Let's start. We got 26 days.
Yep.
Today is gone. You're going to lose 4 to the hurricane. Just subtract that. We're going to get blank. You're not going to be able to get much out for the next 4 days. So, and everything kind of shuts down the Saturday before the election. So you're really probably under 20 days that you have to really get a message out. They need to be sharp. They need to be aggressive. They need to stop answering questions and start asking questions. They're doing all this and sitting down with 60 Minutes and sitting down with Colbert and sitting down with, no matter what, if I come on your show, you're going to ask me the question.
That's true.
If I have a press conference, I get to ask the question.
You'd like to see her do more press conferences?
I'd like for her to put more things in place.
Carville knows it's a complete, absolute clown car. And they know that she's had the worst week of her 2-month campaign. She got a holiday from heaven when Joe Biden abdicated. She was left alone. She was left alone for months at a time. Nobody bothered her. Nobody said a word. And joy, joy, joy. The Democratic National Convention with joy, joy, joy. The Israelis kind of went to ground in Gaza, hunting Hamas in the tunnels. And then after the convention, she began to tentatively put her foot in the water. And she sat down with Dana Bash, and that didn't go so well. Tim Walz didn't do anything for her. He has been a disaster. The vice presidential debate came after the presidential debate. And while arguably Kamala Harris did well in the presidential debate, she's not been able to replicate that performance. Or in fact, the truth of the matter is she's replicated it again and again and again. Everybody in America who's paying attention has seen Kamala Harris not answer every question the same way. And it's a joke now. I grew up in the middle class. I own a gun. It's all a joke. Everybody knows that there's nothing in her head except, can I make it 25 more days? How do I avoid doing what I did on The View? And the fact of the matter is, she can't. She's not qualified for the job. You know it, and I know it. And the poor people in Florida and North Carolina and Virginia and Tennessee are wondering why Alexander Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, is out there saying FEMA's out of money. They're wondering where the federal government is, and she's not coming to help them. Donald Trump has already been to Georgia, and I think he's going to North Carolina next. But he's already been there to do what he can. And the fact of the matter is, she does not have the skill set to be president. And, Hugh Hewitt's opinion, she will be the most anti-Israel president since Israel came into being in 1948. Now, Ike got mad at Israel, very mad at Israel, but he also got mad at Britain and France in the run-up to the 1956 election during the Soviet invasion of Hungary and the Suez Canal fiasco unfolded. Now, that's only 8 years after Israel became a state. It's only 8 years after when they worked with the French and the British to seize the Suez Canal away from Nasser. And Ike was angry, and Ike made everyone withdraw. Ike made everybody get out of, and everything went back, and Nasser got the Suez Canal back. Flash forward 1967, Nasser is about to attack Israel, and Israel preemptively strikes, and in the Six-Day War, not only do they defeat Egypt and Syria and Jordan, they reclaim all of the Sinai Peninsula, which belongs to Egypt. They get Gaza, which belonged to Egypt up until the 1967 war, again, provoked by Egypt and Syria and Jordan. And they get the Old City, and they get the Temple Mount, and that happens in 1967. 6 years later, Nasser has died, and Anwar Sadat is president. He works with Bashar Assad's father to launch the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and that almost does the trick in secular Arab eyes. The secular Arabs who hated Israel almost got them with a lethal surprise. Richard Nixon said, send everything that can fly. Enough anti-tank missiles got there. The battle in the Golan Heights, the battle in the peninsula, made Arik Sharon's name. And they fought back. And since 1973, they've had 3 Lebanon wars. And then they had the invasion of Israel from Gaza, which was given back by the Israelis 15 years ago, 2006, longer, 18 years ago. Israel pulled out. Sharon said, take down the Jewish settlements, give them everything, part of the infrastructure, and they left. And nevertheless, Hamas, a theocratic terrorist mini-army, Hezbollah, a theocratic terrorist major army, it's like a small state, and Iran, the head of the octopus, to quote Naftali Bennett, will not leave Israel alone. And for the last 20 years, we've played cat and mouse with Iran on whether or not Iran would go and obtain a nuclear weapon. And now they are, by some accounts, 2 weeks from, quote, breakout, close quote, the ability to create enough fissile material so that a nuclear weapon could be made. Whether or not it can be delivered, I don't know. If they can condense it to the size of a warhead or if they have to put it into a truck and drive it through the gates of Jordan, I don't know. But I know that Israel has in front of it a right to retaliate after 2 attacks. After 10/7, Joe Biden went to Israel and gave him a bear hug. And that was a good thing. And then it's been slipping ever since. So that now in the new Bob Woodward book, whether or not I trust this, I don't know, Bob Woodward reports that all the Americans in the Biden administration are mad at Netanyahu. They're not mad at Sinwar. They're not mad at the former Nasrallah. They're not mad at Khamenei. They're not mad at the Islamists who would just as soon to kill every Jew and then come and kill Jews in America. They're not mad at them. They're upset with Israel. And yesterday, our ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Green, I believe, gave a long talk, a long speech about how Israel is being mean to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Welfare Agency, which exists only to serve Palestinians and has not done a very good job of it. Linda Thomas-Greenfield slammed Israel's humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, backed up UNRWA, and demanded that The squalid conditions, this is a direct quote, the squalid conditions in the humanitarian zone in southern central Gaza, where 1.5 million displaced civilians have fled, are catastrophic. They are not as catastrophic as the emptied towns of northern Israel. They're not as catastrophic as the destroyed communities, towns, cities, and farms of southern Israel on the Gaza border. They are not as catastrophic as another terror attack in Haifa last night, more rockets from Hezbollah. They're not nearly as catastrophic as any of that. And so Israel is going to do what Israel does. And if you vote at all with Israel as a concern of yours, you need to vote for Donald Trump. I asked him on Monday, why are Arab American voters splitting 42-41, according to the Arab American Institute, between you and Kamala Harris? Why is it tied? I said, because they want peace. The people who are supporting me want peace. I'm reading from the Orlando Sentinel this morning. Hurricane Milton plowed into Florida as a Category 3 storm, exited the state this morning still at hurricane strength. So it was a hurricane all the way across the peninsula. At 5 a.m., the hurricane was 10 miles northeast of Cape Canaveral. Maximum sustained winds had fallen to 85 miles per hour. More than 3 million people are without power. If you're listening to me on your transistor radio, I'm glad you have one. There are many sites of devastation. The storm tracked to the south in the final hours, made landfall near Siesta Key in Sarasota's area, about 75 miles south of Tampa. The situation in the Tampa area and St. Petersburg is still a major emergency. 16 inches of rain in St. Petersburg. Of course, Tropicana Field, you've seen the top of that, which was canvas, is gone. That was torn off. And we won't know how many people are dead for quite a long time. More than 125 storms were destroyed before the hurricane came ashore. And we don't know what happened afterwards. We do know, and we connected with Food for the Poor last night, that they are throwing open the warehouses, rolling out the trucks. They had already geared up, and they are sending relief to North Carolina. And I said, well, let's sponsor a program with them. And so we have a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com where you can call a donation into Food for the Poor. Their headquarters is in Florida. And they are sending out all the emergency assistance, especially the generators. Emergency relief supplies. That's what the banner looks like. You can also call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Or you can text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. I think the easiest thing to do, the thing that the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I did this morning, was go to the HughHewitt.com website, hit the emergency relief supplies. I know Food for the Poor. I trust them, and I know their headquarters are in Florida, and they got a lot of people to take care of. 3 million people without power. That's the tip of the iceberg. The homes that are destroyed, the hygiene that is not working, the food is not available. Lots of people will help. I'm not going to knock anyone for not wanting to help. I know an effective way to help is Food for the Poor, and the banner is at HughHewitt.com. As the sun comes up over a devastated swath of central Florida, I will bring you news as the day goes on of what we are learning there. It's not good. It's been a very long and terrible night for people in Florida. A number of people are dead. A number of homes are destroyed. The damage is intense. The flooding is major. The surf was high. And it's going to go on for many, many days. We have begun a campaign with Food for the Poor because their headquarters are in Florida. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I donated this morning. I hope you will as well. The banner is over at HughHewitt.com. A lot of people are going to need a lot of help in Florida for a long time. There you see, if you're watching on the Salem News Channel, emergency relief supplies. Please hit that and be as generous as you can. And you can also text my name, Hewitt, to 51555, 51555. Just text Hewitt, Hewitt. They'll send you a link. Or you can call in the old-fashioned way, 855-359-4673. Americans always step up for other Americans. Food for the Poor is right there. They normally work in the Caribbean and Central America and South America, but they're throwing open the warehouses and pushing stuff out to the people of Florida. And I would be greatly appreciate if you join FMH and I in doing that. The banner, I think, is the best way to go over at HughHewitt.com. I want to go to Donald Trump in Reading, Pennsylvania yesterday. Cut number 6.
We just rented Madison Square Garden. We're going to make a play. We're going to make a play for New York. Hasn't been done in a long time. It hasn't been done in many decades, but we're going to make, how could New York be run worse than it is, right? With all the problem, everything is corrupt in New York, and we're going to make a play, and let's see. I mean, I think that, the migrants have taken over Madison Avenue. They've taken over Fifth Avenue. They've taken over the parks. The kids can't play Little League. It sounds like a trivial thing. It's a big deal when you have a son that's a Little League player and he can't play. So we're going to go Madison Square Garden. We went to the Coliseum, Nassau Coliseum. We could have filled up the Nassau Coliseum 3 times. It was incredible. We left there a few weeks ago. It was incredible. So we're doing Madison Square.
Now, I want to tell you that over at Fox News, you'll see my new column, As Hurricanes Pummel, Harris Stumbles. Here's what Donald Trump said about the hurricane yesterday, cut number 8.
Before we begin, I want to send our prayers to the people of Florida getting hit just about now. In a little while, you're going to see a hurricane like we haven't seen in a long time, as well as all of the people still recovering from Hurricane Helene. So we have North Carolina that's been hit very hard, and this administration has not done a proper job at all. Terrible, terrible. Nobody's seen anything like it. But we just pray for everybody. We want them all to be good, and we're going to be there hopefully soon, and we're going to help them rebuild and get it all back together. And we hope that God will keep them safe. God will keep them safe.
Good for the former president. Again, head over to HughHewitt.com, hit that relief banner, and be as generous as you can. The former president picked up on Kamala Harris telling The View when asked by Sonny Hostin, would you do anything differently? And she said, I can't think of a thing. Donald Trump came up with a list. Cut number 10.
So Kamala just said that she can't think of one thing she'd do differently than crooked Joe Biden, right? So how about, I'll read off a little list to you. How about the following? She wouldn't do one thing. Remember that. What about the nation-wrecking border invasion, 21 million people? 21 million people plus came into our nation, and among them are murderers, drug dealers, people from mental institutions, human traffickers, mostly in women. How about that? She wouldn't do that differently? She went from the best border in the world to the worst border in the world. She went from, we had a border that was the best in U.S. history, and now we have the worst border anywhere in the world at any time. There's never been a border like this. What she's done and what he's done, what they have done to this country, the worst inflation in the history, costing a typical family almost $30,000. The inflation, she wouldn't do that over again either. Maybe the worst of all, and something that a lot of people don't hear about because look at all the fake news. That's a lot of fake news. I think this is the worst of all in a sense, and you'd almost say, how could it be worse? She lost 325,000 migrant children. Their parents are looking for them. Think of you with their parents. Think of you with their parents. 325 due to incompetence, due to the fact that she had the worst border, due to the fact that she let our great people not run the border. She got rid of all the things that we were doing. We had the safest border. We went from the safest to the worst. Those children are now dead, in slavery, or just plain missing. Probably most of them will never be found again. Think of that. 325,000 because of their incompetence. They're missing. Probably many of them are dead. Number 4, migrant flights, flying illegal migrants into our cities. Remember when she said, no, we want to, about a month ago, she realized this was not playing well for her in the polls. So they came up with a phony little idea that they'll do something. The only thing they didn't do, though, they didn't stop the flights that were pouring in with thousands and thousands, and actually over the course of a couple of years, hundreds of thousands of people flying over our borders. They didn't stop that. So they came from places all over the world into your cities and small towns, changing them forever. And I have to say, ruining them, ruining your cities and towns, including murderers, drug dealers, gang members, people from mental institutions and insane asylums, human traffickers and women. How about number 5, the Afghanistan catastrophe, the most embarrassing event in the history of our country? She wouldn't do that again. You have to understand. She said, no, I'd leave it the way it is. We're just going over just a small list. That was the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. Probably Putin went into Ukraine because of it. He looked and he saw the gross incompetence of this president that can't speak. The October 7th attack on Israel would never have happened, but she said that was fine too because she didn't want to change. She actually said she didn't want to change anything. She'd leave it the way it is. So I said, let's make a list of just some of the bad things. This is just a small list. October 7th, where you take a look at what happened. She doesn't want to change that. The slaughter of a lot of people. The Ukraine disaster, millions of dead people because of the weakness of this administration. Putin never would have gone into Ukraine if I were president. It would never, ever have happened. How about the natural gas export ban that is crushing Pennsylvania right now? Most of you don't even know about that. You know, you hear fracking and all, but she will. But if she ever won this thing, you wouldn't be fracking for 24 hours. But how about that? And it's crushing Pennsylvania, hurting you. It's going on. It's on right now. Pushing, how about this? Pushing transgender ideology on minor children. How about that one? Your child goes to school and they take your child. It was a he and comes back a she. And they do this. And they do it. And often without parental consent. Can you even believe we're saying this? How about...
I can't believe he's saying this, but I think he's doing a very good job. There are so many things that Kamala Harris could have said to Sonny. And she could have said them diplomatically. Could have said, I love Joe Biden, and I was in the room with him when we did Afghanistan, and perhaps we ought to have listened to the generals and not pushed it so fast. She could do that, and it would not be the end of the world. But Joe Biden is stepping on her campaign left, right, and center. There may be bad blood there. I don't know. I'm going to go to break. I want all of you to head over to HughHewitt.com. Please be as generous as possible with the relief banner for Food for the Poor. They've thrown up in the warehouses. They will get the trucks on the road as soon as it is safe. I know how bad it is. I know it's moved offshore, but it's still lashing. The winds are still lashing Daytona Beach. I get a note from people down in Daytona Beach. So please be as generous as you can toward their fellow Americans who have lost much, if not all, in Florida. I want to repeat something that Guy Benson said yesterday afternoon to Stuart Varney, that you can't count on past results or no promise of future performance. Past mistakes by pollsters are no promise that they're making the same mistakes in 2024. They may be oversampling for Trump supporters because they've been unable to sample for them accurately in 2020 and in 2016. So in 2024, it is entirely possible that everything is completely screwed up in the world of polling, and they don't know what to do. So what Guy was saying, and I thought it would be a good warning to my audience, is do not get too high or get too low. Do not think you've got a handle on this. If I look at the Real Clear Politics poll average, Kamala Harris is up by 2. Typically, she needs to be ahead by 4 in the national race to win the Electoral College. In the top battleground states, Trump is up by 0.3%, which is, I mean, it's like saying we don't know who's ahead. because we don't know who's ahead. In the Electoral College, it looks like Trump has an advantage, but we don't know. In the battleground states, Harris is ahead of Trump by 6 points in Virginia. Harris is ahead by 1 point in Nevada. Trump is ahead in North Carolina by 0.3. Trump is ahead in, oh no, it just switched out on me, in every other battleground state. In the battle for the Senate, the GOP is projected for 2 pickups. I think it's going to be better than that. I think they're going to win Michigan. And I'm waiting, standing by for Mike Rogers, who may or may not be ahead. We've got different polls here. We've got Atlas Intel telling us Mike Rogers is up 5. We've got the New York Times Siena poll telling us his opponent is up 5. We've got 2 polls, Quinnipiac and Trafalgar, saying it's tied. And the average is the opponent up 2.2. I can't remember her name, but I will tell you this. I don't know who's going to win Michigan. All I know is if you're listening to me in Detroit or Grand Rapids or UP or up in Kalamazoo, do the work. All right, go over and find the Trump campaign headquarters. Go to Americans for Prosperity. Do the work, because it could be a 10-point election. I cannot, for those of you who are not old enough, we began the program on 10/7/2000. Now we're joined by Mike Rogers from Michigan. Morning, Mike. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I was just telling everyone, I have looked at the Real Clear Politics aggregator. Nobody knows what's going on in Michigan. What do your internals tell you?
We are tied, if not a point ahead. And that momentum has just been stacking up for the last about 6 weeks. All the recent polling and then all the external polling has us either tied or a couple of points ahead. We had one that had us 3 points ahead. Yesterday came out, we were tied. So I think we're in that band of being tied right about now. So this is good news for us. Being in Michigan, being a Republican, being tied going into October, that says good things for November 5th.
Well, tell us a little bit about when people start to vote there and your website where they can contribute if they want to help you out.
Well, if you want to change and flip the Senate, this is the place to pull a few bucks out and send it along. Every little bit helps. It's Rogers, Rogers, for Senate.com, RogersForSenate.com. Voting has started, so we have early ballot voting is out. We'll vote in person 9 days before the election, but there's a ton of ballots out there. So keeping us up on TV between now and the end really, really important. So every little bit helps.
Mike, you're a professional. I got to ask you something. I'm in Maine. I leave next week to go to the Beltway for the big event. And the question is, why is Kamala Harris advertising on Hulu in Maine? Now, the Portland Hulu outlet, no doubt, gets northern New Hampshire. But what does that tell you about the national campaign when they're micro-targeting Maine?
Well, listen, I think they're in trouble everywhere, Hugh. Issues are going to matter in this campaign because it personally affects every single American, every single Michigander. And it's because your groceries are up, your gas are up, your all of the problems that the Democrats have brought to you, including a wide open and dangerous border and fentanyl problems. That is what the Biden-Harris agenda has brought you. And so I think they're trying to make sure that they don't lose certain aspects of their base. They're still advertising to their base. That tells you they have problems. And so
the oldest rule I remember, Mike Rogers, and you ran many times when you were a member of the House, before that you were an agent with the FBI, is that if they're talking about your issues, you're winning. And they are talking about Republican issues, so I would assume that we are winning. Let me play for you, though, the key cut of the campaign from Tuesday, cut number 2, Kamala Harris on The View.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
So, Mike Rogers, what was your reaction to there is not a thing that comes to mind?
Oh, she's telling the truth. That isn't a thing that comes to mind. That may be the only truthful thing she said in the last year. Listen, her campaign handlers are getting out there saying, oh, my God, act like a Republican. Talk about the border. You're going to secure the border. Talk about, you're not for EV mandates. You're not for, you would never ban fracking. I mean, all of the things we know they stand for, they are running away for. And what's interesting, I had the good occasion, Hugh, to be with the other tight race Senate candidates around the state last night. And all of them, we were comparing ads. It's almost identical. I mean, the theme of the ad is the same, and then they fill it in with the personality of whoever they're running the ad for. It's really quite uncanny, and none of it is true. It's unbelievable that they're willing to deceive America in this way just to retain power. It's shocking to me, but it tells me that she's right. She can't think of a thing. A wide open border, loves it. Higher gas prices, well, that's a consequence you'll just have to pay. You just start going down this list. It's dangerous, and how anyone could reward them for another 4 years is beyond me. And by the way, it gets worse because they talk about tax increases on small business, more regulation. We had $1.6 trillion in new regulation from the Biden-Harris administration. $1.6 trillion. That's all cost on the system.
Now, Mike Rogers, I want to ask you about Michigan specifically because former President Trump was my guest on Monday, and I had in front of me the Arab American Institute poll, which showed that 42% of Arab Americans are for Trump and 41% are for Kamala Harris. That means they're evenly split. And I'm not surprised to see the former president gaining among Jewish Americans and other supporters of Israel who are not Jewish, because I think Kamala Harris will be the most anti-Israel president we've ever had. But I am perplexed by the Arab American split. What is going on in that community, which is so important to you in Hamtramck and all around Dearborn and in other parts of Michigan?
So our Arab community is very, very angry at Democrats. It was a very solid Democrat vote in the past few elections, almost en bloc. And I think that the whole Israel situation now has made them turn on the Democrats, because remember, the Democrats were coming into that community saying, "Oh, I'll be with you. I'm for you." And then of course, when October 7th happened, they weren't for them. Oh, and then they were for them, and then they weren't for them, and then they were for them. They would rather, as they have a saying in Dearborn, better to be stabbed in the face than stabbed in the back. And so that started changing in Michigan, and that's why you saw all the contortions happening in Washington, D.C., about what's going on in Dearborn, Michigan, because they understand they can throw the vote in a place like Michigan. If it comes down to 20 or 30,000 votes, believe me, that 40% means something. And so I do believe that I see this movement to Donald Trump because he says he's going to get it fixed and get it solved and stop the fighting. That's exactly where I think that they want to be, and I think that's exactly the kind of conversation that needs to be had. Listen, you have to have the hostages back. You can't have a ceasefire without it. But there's certainly room for conversation on all of that.
Now, last question, Mike, and it's a non-political one. I am a Cleveland Guardians fan from birth. We have not won a World Series in my lifetime, and I'm 68. Yesterday, the Tigers blanked us 3-0 to go ahead 2-1 in a best-of-5. We're back at Tiger Stadium today. I think Bibby's going for us, who's our ace. That robot you've got doesn't pitch until Saturday if we get to Game 5. What's that do to a campaign? I'm just curious. Do you go to the Tigers game? Do you hang around Tiger Stadium, or do you go somewhere else?
A little bit of both. I mean, this is huge for us. I mean, we have the sitting national champions, the University of Michigan. We have, the Lions are on the march, and the Tigers, I think, are going to do it again. And so you think about the energy that gets to the state. It's a feel-good thing. And by the way, 30 years since the national championship came to Michigan, and 30 years since we elected a Republican senator, this just tells you that we're all on the move. Things are more optimistic, and this is going to happen this year. And so when we get that, we try to absolutely. I mean, I'm a Tigers fan and a Lions fan, and we'll participate in all of those activities and be around those fans that know that there's a better day coming. With a guy
it's not fair to have a robot as your best starter, your Cy Young Award winner. It's just not fair. But you hit our robot, Clase, for a 3-run tater, which he's never given up this year. And they did it in Game 2. I'll be watching tonight at 6. So here's my very technical question. What do you do when the Tigers are on? You don't want to have an event when the Tigers are on, do you?
No, you don't. You try to avoid it. Or if you listen, in the last 30 days, you got to keep moving. You got to have events. What we try to do is make sure it's a place where you can be watching the game and being at the event. And so we're trying our best to get this scheduled correctly. But unfortunately, with this, we're less than a month here, and we are grinding it out right up to the November 5th, and we're going to have to work every day, all day, 24 hours a day to get this thing done, and that's exactly what we're doing. And if you can catch a little bit of the Tigers game on the radio or on the TV on the way to an event, come on in. Let's do it.
Then go over to RogersForSenate.com. Rogers, Rogers, no D in there, Rogers, FOR Senate.com. Make a contribution. He's got to hit. How many major media markets are there in Michigan? 6?
There's probably like 4 big DMAs, and it's just expensive. Like they all are now because there's so much advertising. Ugh.
Well, good luck. Keep going. Do not waste a minute. And if you can, grab. Don't be too disappointed today when we bring it back to Cleveland. We're going to have to beat the robot in Cleveland on Saturday, but first we got to win tonight. Go Guards. Thank you, Mike Rogers. Reminding you, if you want to help the people impacted by Hurricane Milton, head over to HughHewitt.com. The relief banner is at the top. Fetching Mr. Hewitt and I ponied up this morning because we know it's a lot of damage across the entire peninsula. It's going to be weeks before they get that back to normal. I'm joined now by Jim Talent, no stranger to tornadoes, as am I. The Midwest is a tornado alley in Missouri sometimes, and certainly in Ohio. Senator Talent, good morning. I talked to Aviv Reddy Gore this morning about Israel and the nuclear sites in Iran. He would like Israel to take a shot. Donald Trump says they're entitled to a shot. What does Jim Talent want them to try?
Oh, well, I think President Trump is clearly right. They're entitled to a shot. And were they to take it and take them out, they would do the whole world an enormous favor. I think Pierre Poilievre said that in Canada. But I think if I had to guess, I think they're going to do a combined response. I think it's going to be cyber. I think they're going to show their tremendous intelligence assets. They've been emptying the cupboard as far as that's concerned. And then I think there'll be some direct strikes of a substantial nature on the military-industrial complex. And I think they'll hold back in reserve some capabilities to go after, for example, the nuclear infrastructure. And look, I trust them. So, I mean, what our government ought to be doing is assisting them and then supporting the decision that they make.
Now, Jim Talent, the most astonishing thing Aviv said today, and I think I want to underscore it with you, the Israelis are not telling the Americans what they intend to do. The Americans are mad about that. But as Aviv noted, when we tell you, you leak it to the New York Times, and it destroys our ability to act. I think they're justified in that worry. Do you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I were them, I would be very careful about what they tell us and when they tell it to us. You notice before the attacks in Lebanon, they called Secretary Austin up like an hour beforehand or something like that. And for exactly that reason, because the administration has been undercutting them at every turn, at least since the late fall of last year. So the Israelis have to protect their own security. This is an existential struggle for them. And they know who their friends are and they know who their friends aren't. And I don't even think we're a fair weather friend at this point.
We're not. I think when they're afraid that we will leak whatever they tell us, that we're not reliable. That's a dangerous position for us. It'll get worse with Kamala Harris. Senator, I was listening to Dwayne's World yesterday, Dwayne's podcast talking. I turned it off after your critiquing of his intro because I didn't want to hear what you had to say because I was going to ask you this question. I didn't want to know the answer before I heard it. So I'll go back and listen to it today. What do you think is going on in this election? You've seen a lot of presidential elections. You know how bad polling is. What do you feel in your bones about 2024?
Well, that's the way to put it, because what does it feel like? Well, it feels like Trump and Vance are getting a lot of momentum. And I judge that in part by what the Democrats are doing. The very fact that they're putting her out in these interviews, which I think is prima facie, as lawyers, good lawyers like you say, is a mistake. I mean, the theme of her campaign is, and I said this to you like 2 months ago, is if you don't vote for Kamala, you're not one of the cool kids. You're weird, or you're a hillbilly, or you're something worse. Okay. Now, if that's the theme of your campaign, you don't want your candidate out talking about any issue, even in softball campaigns, softball interviews, because it moves the direction of the campaign away from the vibes that you want it to be about. And so the fact that I'm reading stories, the Democrats saying internal polling for them is not good, it's going in the wrong direction, and then the logic of the campaign. I mean, the right track, wrong track number is as bad as I've ever seen it. And the American people know that she was part of the Biden administration. Their inclination is going to be to vote for change, which is not Kamala Harris. She confirmed that the other day, right? So there's the
right track number is 28%. The wrong track is 61%, and she said she wouldn't change a thing. How astonishing an answer is that?
And this is a softball interview. Now, to be fair, that's a difficult question for her to answer. I mean, an artful communicator would have more difficulty. Of course, she should have said something like, well, I would have pressured the Federal Reserve more in the summer of 2021 to take action against inflation earlier. I mean, she should have said something minor like that. But it's a hard question to answer because in the first place, Biden's policies were all far left, and she's a far leftist. And she doesn't want to disavow anything that her base supports. In the second place, as I said, any answer she gives on a substantive question raises the danger of a follow-up, even then, either there or afterwards on the internet and on social media. And they don't want to be talking about
Oh,
these
she's getting
issues.
crushed online. Last question, Jim Talent. Do you think Joe Biden is trying to hurt her because he keeps stepping on her stories and her moves? I mean, like at the same moment that she gives remarks, Joe Biden shows up talking about the hurricane.
Well, I don't think he's doing anything to avoid it. Let's put it that way.
That's a good. He is being passive aggressive on an exponential basis. Jim Talent, follow him on X. Follow me to the next hour of the Hugh Hewitt Show. And please, during the break, head to HughHewitt.com. Be as generous as you can with hurricane relief. We know and trust Food for the Poor. That's why we let them sponsor this. That's why the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I began with a donation this morning to them. Please be generous. Milton was savage. My old friend David Bossie joins us. He, the head of Citizens United, famous for bringing the First Amendment back to life at the Supreme Court. And now he's got a brand new movie out, Trump's Rescue Mission. It's available at salemnow.com. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm great, sir. How are you this morning?
I am terrific. First, I want to play my congratulatory music for you because you destroyed the debate commission. And you and I have been on that mission for a long time, but you got it done. Do you think they are ever going to reassemble like the Avengers, or are they gone?
Hugh, we have to hope, all conservatives have to hope that presidential debate commission is gone and gone for good, but we will have to be dedicated to it. You and I and many others are going to have to take the next couple of years. Look, it took me 3 years as a mission, as you well know, to methodically dismantle them. They were so biased, so corrupt, that it had to be done. But let's not forget these people. I don't mean to disparage them, but they're like the old adage, like cockroaches. They just will come back again and again and again. We have to get rid of this biased commission who leans heavily against whoever the Republican nominee is, not just Donald Trump, but for nominees prior. But they really, really hated and had it in for Donald Trump from 2016, 2020, and again this year. It was seen and it was so obvious. So I'm proud to have been, a component, a small part of getting rid of it.
Now, I can't tell people the whole anecdote because it occurred in an off-the-record meeting when the RNC was entertaining debate pitches. David Bossie had the single funniest line I've ever heard given impromptu, which was, objects may be closer than they appear in your back mirror. And everyone in the room broke up. Well, here's what may be closer than it appears: the destruction of legacy media. I do think they have blown themselves up, David. Do you agree with me?
I certainly agree and hope that that's the case. The part of destroying the debate commission was part of the cause. That was part of what we were attempting to do, to educate the American people about the corruption of the biased mainstream media. The three networks that for the last 75 years have really ruled American politics and the American way that we get information. That's over, and it's because of people like yourself and many others who are taking on this new media and the conservative media that really were able to succeed.
Now, David Bossie, tell us about Trump's rescue mission, because all the movies that Citizens United make have a purpose to educate, inform, and perhaps persuade. What is Trump's rescue mission about? And people can go and watch it at salemnow.com, salemnow.com.
Yeah, Hugh, thanks. Trump's rescue mission, Saving America, it's exactly what the title entails. We describe, outline in depth the policy position, whether it is foreign policy, the economy, border and immigration, and we dismantle Kamala Harris's left-wing ideology and her record, and using her own words, juxtaposed to the 4 years of peace and prosperity brought to you by President Donald Trump. So we had to actually make 2 movies this year. We made one that was solely focused on Joe Biden. And when the coup happened, when the coup happened at the convention and they pulled the rug out from under Uncle Joe, we had to pivot. And in very short order, my team we actually made an entirely new film in just about a month. It was an unbelievable undertaking, but an important one. So I hope people will go to salemnow.com and watch this movie. It is imperative that you not only watch it yourself, you show it to your friends, your family, and your neighbors. It is easily sent around. It is incredibly inexpensive. I would give it away if I could. Legally, I would give it away, but I can't. So people just need to watch it and send it to their friends and neighbors who may not be on the Trump bandwagon, but are desperately concerned about the future of America, about the future of hope, growth, and opportunity, as our friend Jack Kemp used to say, and what our future generations have to look forward to. I'm deeply concerned for my children and grandchildren.
Well,
so
my
that's
6th
why
grandchild arrived last week, and so I do worry more about them than I do about me. David, you've been around a while. I've been around a while. Mark Levin has been around a while. We know everybody in politics, but I have never seen some things that I have seen this cycle. I have never seen as bad a candidate as Kamala Harris. I mean, I think she's the worst candidate. And I go back to 1976, Jerry Ford and Jimmy Carter. I think of all those elections and all those candidates, she is the least articulate, least persuasive, least high Q. What do you think as a professional, not as a Republican? Am I wrong?
Yeah. You are so not wrong. Hugh, this woman, it's disappointing that this country is so divided and that the media for the last 8-9 years have tried to destroy and dismantle Donald Trump, that they hate Donald Trump more than they love this country, that they would even allow somebody like this to be the main nominee for a one of the 2 major parties. She is so unfit, ill-prepared, unprepared to be the commander-in-chief on day one. Donald Trump, juxtaposed to that, is ready. He has done it. He can do it again. The first minute of the first day, she is if you just watch the painful, friendly interviews on The View, on Colbert, on the ones that she'll go on, it is devastating to watch the word soup, salad, sandwich that she does on a minute-to-minute basis, not just once in a while. She has no capacity. She does not understand the important issues. And America should fear, to be candid.
Yeah, now, David Bossie, if I say to you, Gerald Ford, there is no Soviet domination of Europe. If I say to you, Michael Dukakis in tank. If I say to you, George H.W. Bush, look at his watch. If I say to you, Mitt Romney, 47% are binders of women. We instantly know what those moments are. I want to play for you. I think it's going in that category, cut number 2.
Well, if anything, would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of
Bossy, am I right? Is it in the category of Dukakis in the tank?
It certainly is. And the other one is, what's the difference when Colbert asked her, what's the difference? And she said, well, I'm not Joe Biden. I mean, obviously that's true. And she just is so immature in her answers, in her dialogue, in the context that she puts these answers. You're exactly right. And I will just say, Hugh, I don't believe necessarily that moment has happened yet. We have so much more time in this campaign that she may not have delivered her dumbest line yet.
All right, now David Bossy again. I'm gonna ask you to stay through the break so I can make it 2 segments out of this, but I want to set up the question. I'm up in Maine. I come back to the Beltway next week, and Maine is one market. Portland. I know. I'm sorry to do it, but I have to do it for the election. Hulu is, of course, a Roku channel. She is advertising in Portland in order to reach northern New Hampshire. Kamala Harris is, again and again and again. If we watch Slow Horses, if we watch Murders in the Building, no matter what, we see Kamala Harris. What does that tell you if she's advertising up here?
Yeah, Hugh, and let me just tell you, I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, right outside the Beltway. Maryland is plus 30 in the Harris column. She's advertising here. Why? Because she has to be advertising in Virginia. She has to buy the market and waste enormous amounts of resources in D.C. and in Maryland, which are going to go to her in 100%. But she's worried about Virginia, Hugh. So she's worried about New Hampshire. She is worried about Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I truly believe the path to 270, maybe we could go into that in the next segment. I helped develop the path to 270 in the 2016 campaign. Steve Bannon, Kellyanne Conway, and I ran that campaign. And I got to tell you, this is looking very promising.
David Bossy of Citizens United, his brand new movie is Trump's Rescue Mission. It's available at salemnow.com. All right, David, put on your path to 270 hat. How does Trump win this? Where does he win it? And give us a couple of variations from maybe the easiest way to win to the most, inside straight.
Yeah, which we drew the inside straight in 2016. Let's make no bones about it. We ran an error-free campaign in 2016 in that last 30 days, and Hillary did not. She was befuddled with problem after problem. Donald Trump ran an incredible campaign and did well in the debates. This year, I truly believe in whiplash. I believe that Arizona and Georgia in an easier way, but both of those states are whipping back to Donald Trump because they see what they have done. They see what the 4 years of a Biden administration has meant to them in their state. So I personally believe North Carolina, even with the problems of the hurricane and the voting, is going to go back into Donald Trump's column. We're going to win North Carolina. We're going to win Georgia and Arizona. Once you do that, you really, to be honest with you, Hugh, need to win one of either Pennsylvania, Michigan, or Wisconsin, and you get well above 270. You're at 280, 281, 282, 278, but you only need 270. And I think that is the most reasonable way that he gets to 270. I will just posit to you that this could go much bigger. That Donald Trump is running a campaign right now that is running on all cylinders. He is bringing out crowds. He has had an incredible run since J.D. Vance's incredible debate performance, to be honest with you. Every minute of every day since he has been on offense, he has been running, and they've had to deal with hurricanes and other problems. Some of it's the good things that Donald Trump's doing, and some of it's just plain good luck. And you need both of those things to win a presidential campaign these days. But I will tell you, Virginia, Michigan are within reach. They're above, they're outside the margin of error in polling right now. They're 3, 4, 5 points Harris leads, but they are gettable. Minnesota is right on the heels of that, but also Oregon. No one is paying attention to Oregon. In my opinion,
first I've heard that.
Oregon is closer than anyone thinks. That is a red state dominated by one population center. And that population center has been decimated by Antifa and other organizations who have decimated that city and that state. Those people are ready for a change.
So David, I want to get one more question in. Can I keep you one more segment? Okay, so during the break, head over to salemnow.com, get David's new movie, Trump's Rescue Mission. Citizens United always comes through in this cycle, and they came through again. It's over at salemnow.com. Watch it, share it, send it, tell people about Trump's Rescue Mission by David Bossie and his friends at Citizens United. David Bossie has got a brand new film out from Citizens United entitled Trump's Rescue Mission. You can see it at salemnow.com. David, here's my question. On Monday, the former president was gracious enough to return to the program. I had asked if he wouldn't join me on the anniversary of the massacre in Israel, and he was happy to do so, and we talked for a half hour. It is clear to me that if you're a supporter of Israel, I'm not Jewish, and I think there are many, many strong supporters of Israel who are not Jewish. If you are a supporter of Israel, Jewish or not Jewish, you're going to vote for Trump in this election. But what I asked him, what I want to ask you, the Arab American Institute polls Michigan, and the Arab American vote in Michigan is 42 Trump, 41 Harris. I'm surprised by that. I asked the former president, why is that? He said, people want peace. Why do you think it's 42-41?
Well, there's several reasons. One of them, if you look and study this, I believe that the Muslim population is very unhappy. They can never be happy with the Harris-Biden administration's tacit support of Israel from their worldview. From conservatives and people who support Israel, they have not done enough. They have tried to weave this pathway to appease the Muslim American population, voting population, in some of these key battleground states. But then again, they have to keep Israel as an ally. And I think that anything that they do to make it look like America supports Israel is, in effect, a no vote from the Muslim community. That's why if it's split 40, 42, 42, that's a huge win for Donald Trump. And that's why Michigan, to be honest with you, that's why Michigan is deadly close for the former president.
When he says they want peace, I hear him say they saw the Abraham Accords, they saw the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, and pretty close to completion Saudi Arabia. Peace was breaking out, as was trade and a flowering of the Middle East, until Hamas invaded Israel a year and a week ago. And the consequences of that have been disastrous for everyone. I always believe voters are smart, David. I know you believe that too. I think Arab Americans, like Jewish Americans, and like just American Americans of all sorts, just want a stable world. And this clown car of administration cannot deliver it.
Hugh, let's not forget, there are plenty of people who come here for the wrong reasons. But the vast majority of citizens who come here legally, come here for the right reason. They want the American dream. They want a shot at the American dream. My Italian ancestors did the same thing. Yours did the same thing. It is what historically has made America great, but they got to do it legally. And folks who come here who want the American dream, the shot at the American dream, don't want war around the world, because it's a destabilizing force, not only for their families that have been left behind, but for their futures here in America. So I totally agree with you. And the president's exactly right. They want peace.
On that note, David Bossie, thank you. Trump's Rescue Mission is available at salemnow.com. Keep coming back, David. Keep doing your great work. Boy, he took apart the debate commission, and my hat is off to him for doing so. But more than that, he's been helpful at the RNC for 4 years. Nobody really wants to do the job that David agreed to do. Nobody wants that job, and David did it. Thank you, David. And salemnow.com is where you go. Let me tell you about, first of all, hurricane relief. The pictures are terrible. We are aware that 3 million people are without power in Florida. Some of you are listening to me on your transistors, waiting for updates at the bottom of the hour. They will come on your AM band. But in the meantime, everyone else in America, emergency relief supplies are in Florida at the headquarters of Food for the Poor, and they are rolling them out. They know how to source what is needed. They know how to deliver what is needed. That's why the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I went there first thing this morning and made our $1,000 contribution. And I would ask, as many of you who can do that, not many of you can do that, we can. I know that money will go to Food for the Poor, and it will get people relief today in a ravaged state that needs it from East Coast to West Coast, from Sarasota to Daytona and north, and from Sarasota to Tampa, and everything in between. It was awful, and we're doing our best to help you. The relief banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. Please go there and be as generous as possible. If you want to call, you can also call Food for the Poor at 35. Let me get the number correct. I always screw up the number here. It is area code 855, toll-free number, 855-359-4673. Tax-deductible donation, or text my name, Hewitt, to 51555. Thank you. Gabe Evans, I've just posted your website over on X, which is Gabe for Colorado. Welcome back. How goes the campaign? And fill everyone in on what they need to know, because I think you might be a majority maker.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. The website is electgabeevans.com. I'm running out here in Colorado's 8th Congressional District. But we just had Speaker Mike Johnson in the district on Sunday. And the reason he's here, with his words, this is a national top 5 priority race for Republicans. It was decided by less than a point 2 years ago. My opponent and I are currently neck and neck in the polls. This is a race that we've got to win. I was a 12-year U.S. Army vet, another 10 years in law enforcement, current Republican state rep. I'm focused on things like securing the border, public safety, and these are messages that are resonating in Colorado because we're the third most dangerous state in the country right now. We're more dangerous than California, New York, Oregon, Washington State, Illinois. Folks are ready for a change, and it's time to send a cop to Congress to fix these things.
No, it's a great line, time for a cop in Congress. ElectGabeEvans.com. Am I right, Gabe? That's the website for the campaign?
ElectGabeEvans.com.
Elect Gabe Evans. ElectGabeEvans.com. $25, $50, $100, whatever we can send helps. Now, Gabe, tell people where the district is in the event that they might have friends or family there that they can call and lobby.
This is the North Denver suburbs up to the city of Greeley, predominantly in Adams and Weld County, if you're familiar with Colorado, but North Denver suburbs.
So what did Speaker Johnson tell them? Because I believe we could have anything from losing the House to a 25-seat Republican majority, and you're kind of a bellwether race. What did Speaker Johnson tell your fundraiser?
Yeah, so Colorado right now is unfortunately trending pretty blue, but Speaker Johnson's message has always been those are the states where we have the biggest opportunities because folks have seen the results of failed leftist policies. Right now in Colorado, we're shelling out hundreds of millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, every year for illegal immigration. As I said, we're the third most dangerous state in the country right now. We're the number 2 state in the country for teenagers overdosing and dying on fentanyl. My opponent passed a law that makes it illegal for local and state law enforcement to even reach out and coordinate with immigration and customs. So when we have drug dealers, violent transnational criminal gangs that are operating in our community, it is illegal for law enforcement to pick up the phone and call ICE and say, come get these folks and deport them out of our communities. The result of that, $27 billion in lost economic output from Colorado every year just because of our crime rates. We're the number 1 state in the nation for cocaine usage. We either are or have been number 1 for bank robberies, for motor vehicle theft. Folks are sick and tired of this. They're sick and tired of the cost of living. They're sick and tired of the illegal immigration crisis. And this is why, as Speaker Johnson said, this is why this is such a bellwether seat because folks have seen with their own eyes the result of failed progressive left policies. And I think this gives us a truly ripe path forward to be able to flip this seat and drive some change and show folks that we have a better way. There's a better path forward when it comes to securing our border, keeping our communities safe, and getting the cost of living under control.
Gabe Evans, I have a friend who I became a friend with 45 years ago in college. Her son is a big city cop. So we're Harvard grads. Her son became a cop in a tough city. And what she told me last summer is that cops see things every day that they've never seen before. They're in more danger than they've ever been before. Is she correct? She also recommends that every cop see a mental health specialist by order of their department at least twice a year, just even if nothing's wrong with them, so they can talk about what they're seeing. What is the life of a policeman like right now?
Honestly, it's really tough, particularly under Democrat control. My opponent voted for blatant defund the police policies. She voted to empower criminals. She voted to lower the penalty for drug dealers. And then she voted to give convicted drug dealers their guns back. She voted to lower the penalty for people who commit violent crimes with guns from 15 years to 4 years. And all of that just makes life absolutely miserable as a police officer. You can't catch the bad guys. If you do catch the bad guys, they're going to be out of jail before the ink's dry on your report, committing more crimes. And so the statistic is in the average American's lifespan, they're going to be involved in about 2 to 3 what are called critical incidents. It's basically a legitimate life-threatening situation. In a 20-year career, your average police officer is going to be involved in 800 critical incidences. The result of all of that stress, because stress is toxic for your heart, the result of all of that stress is that every year that a cop spends in law enforcement after 20 is 1 year off the end of their life. And law enforcement officers, on average, experience their first heart attack 19 years before the average American. Most Americans get their first heart attack in their 60s. Your average law enforcement officer that's spent their career in the field will get their first heart attack when they're 46 years old. It's a direct result of the stress. We can mitigate so much of that stress by actually letting cops do their job and hold the violent criminals accountable that are committing crimes in our communities.
Elect Gabe Evans. That's the best. That's the best ask for support I've ever heard, Gabe, because only a cop can talk to people about what it's like to be a cop. Thank you for your service in the streets. I want everyone in Colorado to go out and help Gabe Evans. ElectGabeEvans.com. And if you're not in Colorado and you're not, there are only 25 competitive seats in the entire United States. This is one of them in Colorado's Congressional District number 8. Please help Gabe out. ElectGabeEvans.com. Thank you, Gabe. Let me go and check the mortgage rates while I can. Our sponsor is AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. And right now, the 10-year Treasury went up again yesterday, 4.088, about 4.1%. That means your 30-year fixed rate is back in the mid-sixes. Whatever you need to do, you're going to have to do it with a mortgage lender. And the best person to go to are Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian. I have known both for a long time. When the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I moved from California to the Beltway, they did our mortgage there. And I'm just a customer. And tens of thousands of you have called. And I think more than 10,000 of you over 10 years have applied with them. Most of you have gotten your loan with them. Dwayne did, other people in Salem did. But you got to call first. 888-888-1172. If you're a veteran, they'll do a VA loan. If you're a first-time home buyer, they will really help you through the complexities. If you're a senior, 62 years and older, and you are living in a house that you paid off because you bought it when you were 25 and you paid it off when you were 55, a lot of equity, and you don't know how to tap it and you don't want to get a home equity line of credit, well, Andrew and Todd can do a HELOC. Some people want a line of credit. Other people just want a reverse mortgage. They don't want to make another payment. They want to get their equity out and live off the interest on it, not dip into it. Doesn't hurt your family, doesn't hurt your inheritors. All you need is someone to walk you through it. And it begins at andrewandtodd.com or 888-888-1172. I know these men. I trust these men. They will get you the best rate. I'm afraid we're in a very tumultuous period of time right now where the 10-year Treasury reflects it's gone up, right? cost of buying a house has gone up. The cost of insurance in the aftermath of Hurricanes Helene and Milton is going to go up, and not just in North Carolina and Tennessee, Georgia, Virginia, South Carolina, and now Florida, but everywhere. And they're going to help you negotiate that as well. They know what they're doing. Trust them. 888-888-1172. While I am talking about hurricanes, when Hurricane Helene hit in North Carolina, especially the mountains, I urge you to give to Team Rubicon. Those folks, the gray shirts, they show up and they go cut down the trees that have fallen on your house, and they make sure the power is turned on and off in a safe way. They have the skills. What happened in Florida overnight is a food for the poor effort. That's why Tom Troutip got a hold of him last night. We put the banner up this morning. The Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I made our contribution this morning. Because Food for the Poor's headquarters, the headquarters building is in Florida. The warehouses are in Florida. The quickest way, the skills that they need there are food and water and emergency hygiene kits, emergency supplies. If your mobile home is gone, you're going to need a lot of different things, but you're going to need immediately the disaster kit. And Food for the Poor has those prepackaged. They put them on the truck and they send them out. They can send as many as we can raise money for. $100 does one preparedness kit for one family in a shelter. So if we want to do 10 families, maybe you can do a half a family. Everything counts. $10, $50, $100, $1,000, $10,000, whatever you want. The donor button is at hughhewitt.com. Please be generous. If you're old-fashioned, you want to call somebody up, they have a phone number, 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. 3 times is a charm. 855-359-4673. The lunch rule is 7 times. I have in front of me right now the United States Naval Academy class of 1982. I printed off their class logo because my friend Rhett Rasmussen, who runs besthotgrill.com, he got tired of me misclassing him. I had him one lower and one higher. Well, I finally printed it out, Rhett. It's 82. Go class of 82. Go Navy, beat Army. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is finishing off the book, The Restless Wave. My brother-in-law finished it. He's a Naval Academy grad, 67. Rhett, you're going to love this book. And all you have to do is know that besthotgrill.com, best grills in America, best fire logs in America, best fireballs in America, and it's class of 1982, United States Naval Academy. Got it right, Rhett, finally. 7 times, I got it right. I end the show the way I began the show by reminding you, hurricane relief, there's a button over at hughhewitt.com for Food for the Poor. Their headquarters is in Florida. That's where we contributed this morning. If you want to help, and man, it's a mess, go over to hughhewitt.com, contribute to Food for the Poor. Josh Kroshauer joins me now from Jewish Insider. Josh, I began the show with Haviv Reddy Gur spending a half an hour on Israel's 7-front war and the sad fact that Israel doesn't trust America with anything. And Haviv just said, we can't tell you anything. It leaks. I think he's right. What do you think?
Well, let's put it this way. I don't think it's a coincidence that a lot of the preparation for any response to the Iranian ballistic missile attack is coming around this election period, because the politics of this country are still resoundingly pro-Israel, and you can even see in both the White House and even in a lot of these congressional races, the Democrats who have been on the fence on the issue have suddenly sounded more hawkish, more supportive of Israel. Kamala Harris, notably in that 60 Minutes interview, said Iran was the biggest geostrategic threat that the country faces. Alyssa Slotkin, in a Michigan Senate debate this week, said she's like a big hawk when it comes to Iran. This is not stuff we've heard, and it shows why the White House, which has been urging, as you noted, Hugh, de-escalation. They don't want that. They've been cautioning Israel not to attack nuclear facilities, not to attacking energy facilities in Iran. Israel is not telling the U.S., I think, the full extent of their plans, and they also know that the political support for Israel to respond against Iran in this country is high. There's not much support for the Islamic regime in Iran, Hugh, and there's a lot of support for Israel. So I think Israel.
What I told Aviv is Whatever Israel does is fine by me. I don't know what their security cabinet sees. I don't trust Biden and Harris, but I don't expect you to be there. I want the benefit of your bipartisan, nonpartisan objectivity, Josh. What do you understand happened with the CBS interview of Kamala Harris? It looks like a pretty radical chop job was done on the editing to help her. That's what it looks like. I don't know because I don't have access to the original video, but what's your impression of what the 60 Minutes producers and maybe Ed Harris did?
Yeah, no, that wasn't my. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't say that. I would say that was not the greatest interview for Kamala Harris. So if that was edited in her favor, that still did not. I don't think portray her in a effective and positive light. Look, she's been someone who has been rehearsed and scripted to a fault. So her biggest most effective political moments have been sort of on the debate stage, in the prosecutor, on Senate hearings, when she can prepare and take the time to prepare remarks. When she's asked about policy, when she's sort of off the cuff, as she was on the 60 Minutes interview, as she's been in some of these other soft media settings, she's not been effective. I did not think that was an effective interview for Harris.
Oh, it was terrible. The View was worse. But Josh, what I'm asking you, I'm talking to you right now in real time. People are watching on the Salem News Channel. Can see you, they can see me, they can hear us on the radio in real time. I do not edit my guests. I had no idea. I thought it was live to tape, which is okay in broadcast. You can pre-record someone and play it live to tape. I think they did a chop job, and I'm hesitate to say that, but it just looks like they did the best they could by her. No wonder Trump won't go on CBS.
Well, I don't know about that, Hugh. I do know that 60-minute segments are not live to tape. They're that you do see them produced and edited in the way that they were. So as long as they weren't misrepresenting what she said, I didn't think anything was out of the ordinary.
I think they may. I don't understand it well enough. I've seen enough things online to raise the question. The View is live to tape or it's live. That was worse. What did you think she ought to have said when Sunny Hostin said, "Is there anything you would do differently?" What's her best answer?
Sunny Hostin is the most progressive left-wing host on The View, and she asked the basic question: how would you be different than Joe Biden? What would you do differently? And she didn't have an answer. Well, she basically said she would be the same. She didn't have anything off the cuff that would distinguish her from from the president. It's kind of remarkable that the whole convention theme, the whole strategy of the Harris campaign has been to make her the candidate of change, understanding that President Biden is not all that popular, and she still was unable to execute in keeping some distance between her and the president. It's awkward. She's still the vice president. She still has a governing role with this administration, and it's always been awkward for sitting vice presidents when they run for president. But boy, that was not a good political answer, and it was intended as a softball by Sunny Hostin.
It was up there with Mike Dukakis in the tank and George H.W. Bush looking at his watch. Josh Kroshower, we got 30 seconds. I think they're going to hit the nuclear facilities. That's my hunch. That's my guess. That's what former President Trump told me on Monday. They should do. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm not. And that the military strategy is not my area of expertise. But what I will say is that the biggest question is whether Israel can do it on their own, or whether they would need U.S. Military supplies to actually go get underground, hit those very underground bunkers where a lot of the nuclear facilities are.
There are only a dozen sites. They can set it back, even with what they have without American help. Josh Kroshower on X. Thank you. Follow him at Jewish Insider as well. Follow me to Tomorrow America, or go over to Highly Concentrated Q for the podcast if you missed the Be Ready Gur from Israel at the start of the program. Thank you all. Remember, hurricane relief, food for the poor button is over at HughHewitt.com. Be as generous as you possibly can be in Florida. Be strong. Our prayers and thoughts are with you, and our checks.